this competency is really about partnering to transfer learning and insight into progress for the client so that the coaching conversation is not uh, an entity unto its own. It's part of a greater system that the client lives in. So we have to remember that the facilitating growth competency is really about promoting autonomy and ownership of this process for the coachee, that the client is responsible to themselves for their results, not to the coach. And that might seem a little bit paradoxical if you think about coaching as a helping profession. However, what we're doing is helping people become more whole, more capable, and more resourceful as they are coached. So facilitating client growth is about progress. It's not so much about results. It's about becoming, not necessarily arriving. We want the client to be able to take the insights from a session and make progress, incremental progress. For facilitating growth, there are two significant changes that we want to consider. One is the addition of the subcompetency 8.07, which says that we partner as coaches with the client to integrate learning and sustain progress throughout the coaching engagement. Before, the focus was on let's talk about this session and this session only. Now we're going zooming out and we're saying, what is the sustainability of this change in the client's life? So we're looking at a greater picture of the client in a progressive way that builds momentum over time and using each of the coaching sessions to do that. So we're changing that focus while also adding another slight change, which is the language around celebrating your client, which is now acknowledging your client instead. So we remove the word celebrate and added acknowledge at the end of a coaching session to allow more global appreciation of the client and the work they're doing to engage in change, in positive change for themselves and their lives. When a coach is doing this well, facilitating growth, they are focused on bringing to light the insights from a session for the coachee by the coachee. I want to emphasize by the coachee here because, again, our tendency is to want to paraphrase to the client. Well, this is what I noticed that went, that emerged in the session for you. We want to step out of that role because autonomy for the client means the client is doing the work. Let your client do the heavy lifting. We don't need to do that for the client. And that's actually a really nice gift for a coach. We don't have to have answers for our clients. It's for them to discover their own answers. And so in facilitating growth, it's not just about the aha moments in a session, it's about going deeper to support the client to nurture progress. Design commitments with your clients. Design sustainability in terms of long-term progress, while also protecting your client's confidence. Making sure that they are not overwhelmed with all these to-dos at the end of a session, but helping them to narrow down what's most important and what will bring them closer to the desired outcome. I also want to emphasize here that it's not necessarily about actions as it is about progress. And progress could look like reflection, observation, maybe just time to think. It may not be an action or a to-do list or a task that you need to execute on. So I really like using the word commitments rather than what will you do, or as opposed to putting too much emphasis on task-related strategies. And so here we're focused on checking back in with the client for the goal, making sure that we've checked in on progress for the session and progress that will exist outside the session for the client. We want to also recognize that it's an opportunity to ask the client about their intentions, their learning, what stood out for them, what has shifted for them. It's that all important measure of change from the beginning of the session to the end of the session. When coaches struggle with facilitating growth, we will often hear, as assessors or as mentors, we'll hear coaches trying to fix something for the client, trying to problem solve for the client, and really not honoring the coachee as the expert in their own life. So, to do this well, we want to stay out of knowing, in other words, thinking we know what the client needs. We want to stay and sit in the wondering position. What does this client need to move forward, to make progress? What has the client learned from the session? What will be the anchor of this learning for the session, from the session for the client? And so it's about letting the client own this process to create autonomy for the client in their own thinking and to make them accountable to themselves for their progress. I think that there's so much that we can support our clients with at this stage of the conversation, that we really want to help the client feel the celebration of the reflection they just did in the session by acknowledging that work rather than celebrating it like a cheerleader, which is why that change in the competency is so important. Acknowledgments help people feel seen, heard, and like they matter. And for you, the coach, to witness the coachee's experience in the session and then acknowledge it is such a beautiful way to feel validated as the coachee, to feel witnessed as the coachee. And so your role here as the coach is to go deeper than the surface. Look for the opportunities to evoke awareness at this stage to facilitate the long-term growth and progress of your client.